Welcoming, guys, to the second episode of Around the Hardwood. Before we get started, I'd just like to say, if you're not following us on any of our social medias, go do that right now. Just want to thank you so much for the support you guys showed in the first episode. It did phenomenal. We got over 1,000 views. Today, we're going to be talking about the Boston Celtics, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who's the top dogs in the East, trade targets around the NBA, the Draymond Green situation that took the NBA by storm the other night. We have Celtics insiders joining us in. He's been on the podcast before, Finn Sands. He's a great guy. If you're in the Celtics world, the Celtics Nation, you know the insiders. And hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Let's get right into it. The Boston Celtics got Kristaps Porzingis back. Last night they played home game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. They came out victorious, 120-113. But I feel like there's a lot to dissect from this game, from the Celtics win, because it kind of felt like in a first quarter, which everything was going wrong. And it just felt like, God, they're turning the ball over a lot. And it just instantly shifted to this could have potentially been the most complete, sound playoff type of game they have played in some time now. Obviously, with Kristaps coming back in the lineup, that helps that. So, guys, Boston still number one on the East, top of the East, 17-5. They're 11-0 at home. A stat that sticks out to me, I posted this on Instagram, 7-0 when committing 11 or fewer turnovers. Now, I know you might think that makes sense. Fewer turnovers means better record. However, Chicago Bulls are second in the league at 12.9 turnovers per game. They're 12.3, and, they're towards the bottom. So, Seamus, starting off with you, what did you think that the Celtics did well in the second half, or really after that first quarter in last night's game, that kind of allowed them, or showed improvement for you?
Defensively, they stepped up the intensity a bit for sure. Now, in the first half, the Cleveland Cavaliers just came out absolutely hot, to the point in which you kind of looked at their shooting and went, that might not be sustainable. And Ian and I talked about it a lot last night. The Cavaliers, they got into Boston at 4 a.m. last night. And the Boston Celtics, on the other hand, they've only seen one road game since Black Friday, and have been at home now for the last 3 days, resting since the last game against the New York Knicks. And last night's game, you look at the lead tracker on last night's post game, you can just see the dwindling of the Cavs' ability to stay within that game. And I thought the Celtics, using the home crowd's momentum, they were able to take over the game and up their intensity on both ends of the floor. And the shot making was absolutely incredible by the Celtics. You just go down the list, every single Celtic was able to contribute in a certain way, no matter how many shots they had, whether it was Tatum and Brown taking a high volume of shots, or some of the bench guys who came in and made an impact. Every single player last night was efficient in their own role. And it was really not the perfect game for the Celtics, because their start, usually we see really good starts out of the Celtics and they can't come back in the third quarter. But this one was kind of the opposite. They're playing the other role. They didn't start well, and then they came running back in the second half. And that second half really symbolized almost a perfect game for the Celtics if they could play a full 48 minutes of that, what we saw in the second half. And that was playing consistent basketball on both ends of the floor.
First of all, Finn, how are we doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. You guys know the insiders, Finn Sands. I mentioned in the introduction and the intro to this video, they were on the first episode. Finn came on. Always a pleasure having them. But Finn, we haven't really gotten a chance. I can't remember the last time. Maybe playoffs last year, I got to sit down and talk C's with you. So let's go over the basics, I guess. Where are you kind of at right now? Do you like where we are?
So far, I think I'm with everyone. I think there's a lot of good, and, there's also some bad as well. As far as I'm concerned, the Celtics have the best starting five in the NBA. And as we continue to go throughout the season, I feel like it's becoming less and less of a debate. I think what makes the Celtics so good are their role players, right? You have Derek White. Derek White has played at all-star level this year, considering the amount of touches he gets, the deflections, the steals. And Drew Holiday, he doesn't really shoot too much either, but, it's all the little things that they do. They help this team win. I think Porzingis obviously has been an amazing fit, especially with Jaylen Brown. Like we saw in the two games where Porzingis didn't play, JB had 0 assists, but, when KP is playing, the two-man game they have has been really elite. So I think there's a lot of good things to look forward to. I think another underrated thing has been coaching. I think Joe's matured a lot coming into the season. He's learned from his mistakes, and I think last night was definitely a testament to that, especially
Yeah,
in the second half. So you have Porzingis, who struggled in the first half. In the
right.
second half, yeah, they made it an emphasis to get him the ball, and that changed
Exactly.
the game. You go into the fourth quarter, okay, you understand that we're getting cooked in these drop coverage, pick and roll scenarios. What do? We make adjustments. We start playing more help defense and being more aggressive coming off these screens, and it leads to a Celtics win. So I think that last year that's a game they lose, and I've seen a lot of maturity from the team as a whole, and I'm excited to see how they look moving forward.
Yeah, I think that it was a game, and I'm going to highlight, I think, when you look back on the year, and maybe that it's not the turning point because they've been so good through the first 20 games. But it's kind of a game where you look back on, you say, okay, this is what when we saw how good this team could be, because it was against a team that was shooting the ball well coached team. Mitchell, Garland, they had it going. Jared Allen was playing well. Like this wasn't a pushover game like against the Indiana Pacers. It was, it had a playoff type of intensity and feel to it. And I agree. I thought the adjustments, and I tweeted this out, were phenomenal. I thought I was watching, and then Tatum came out, or Missoula came out of the first half, into the second, switched Jason Tatum on Jared Allen, and I loved that because it took away the high PNR action with Allen. It took him out of that, and I thought that was an adjustment that I personally loved. Because again, I feel like one of the knocks on this team has been, okay, can they adjust? And I think that something we're starting to see is that they can. And Missoula, again, it's going to take time, and I agree with that. But Ian, so um, as much good as there was, I think this team has shown a weakness, and that weakness is when one guy's out of the lineup, things thin out. We've seen how good Porzingis and Holiday are. You know, where do you go? Who needs to step up, I think, in those games? Because you've seen these bench players and role players play so well, but it kind of feels like this team gets to a different level when Porzingis and Holiday are playing opposed to out. So who needs to step up?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because we were talking about that on the post game show yesterday. We were like, huh, the Celtics are really good when their entire team is there. Their top six guys are there. And all of their losses this season have come when we've had at least one of the top six players out. And,
Right.
you could say, oh, that's just going to happen. Players aren't going to play every single game. But at the same time, it's kind of a little bit concerning because you're like, oh, maybe the depth isn't as good as maybe it should be. Um, I'd like to see. I mean, I think he had a good game last night, but I'd like to see a little more out of Peyton Pritchard.
Yeah, I agree.
Sam Hauser has been great. Over the last couple games, he hasn't done a whole lot, but he's still been fine. He still has been doing the job. I think he's arguably been the best player off the bench next to Al Horford. And I think Luke Cornett, as much as as much as we've had problems with Luke Cornett, it feels like for what his role is, I think he's doing fine. Honestly,
Yeah, I agree.
like
Yep.
it does feel like sometimes every single time he touches the ball, there's a player that's shooting over him and making everything, but that's just tough shot making. There's not really much you can do about it, but for the position that Luke Cornett is in right now, I think he's doing a pretty good job. He's played a lot better, especially over the last month or so. He's been a lot better than he was in training camp or in the regular season. So I don't really know if it's a big personnel thing. I think if the Celtics can find a guy through trades, I feel like that's gonna help their bench a lot more. I think they need another big, maybe a guy like Andre Drummond. I don't know how great Andre Drummond would do on this team, but a guy like him who is just another big off the bench, defensively minded, can just rebound the ball, can give you a little something on offense, maybe be a lob threat, something along that line.
I think that I've wanted to so badly. I've wanted to be like, oh my, I want to find something wrong with what Cornette's doing, but I agree. I don't really think you can. I mean, he's just playing. I mean, I think his defensively, I'm not a fan of what he does in the pick and roll action. In the Cornet contest drives me absolutely nuts now. I think it's.
But I will say he has not been doing that this much
He
this
hasn't.
season as he did last year.
And I'm happy about it because I think it's the stupidest thing ever. I don't think there's any way that could actually work. And that's no dis to Cornet, but he's been playing really well. And, you know, offensively, he's scoring efficiently. He doesn't demand the basketball. He's a great pick and roll guy from the offensive side of things. And yeah, I wouldn't mind getting depth there, but I think it's something this team needs. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. I think that they could use, and I financially, I don't know where we're at. Seamus, you might have a better idea than I do, or maybe you do, Finn. I'd like to see another bigger guard, and I love Pritchard, but it just doesn't really feel like Pritchard's the guy we need. It doesn't really feel like he brings something that's, you know, championship contributor status, if that makes sense.
Do you feel as if maybe, I don't really know exactly which type of player the Celtics need exactly, because I'm not willing to just let Pritchard go or just sell him for anything, because I think for the price in which he's paid right now is fairly reasonable for the role in which he plays. And one could look at it and go, yes, he's playing maybe too big of a role, which he can't be the sixth man, and he's honestly not the sixth man. You could give that role to either Al Horford or Sam Hauser at the moment in time, or even Luke Cornett, for a matter of fact. But Peyton Pritchard, he can play a role on a team that is valuable enough to justify his $7 million per year contract. But looking at where the Celtics are at, if they do want to spend a little extra money, I would say probably maybe another shooting wing, because I'll bring this up right now. The Celtics, in terms of their play type this year, right? They're one of the better teams in points per possession. They're first in points per possession in spot up attempts, right? But they're middle of the pack in terms of their frequency. Yet you go over to isolation, right? In terms of play type, the Celtics are near the top of the league in frequency. Matter of fact, they are top 5. They're top 5 in isolation frequency. And you just go, if some of those attempts go to the perimeter, spot up attempts, right? Turn those into spot up attempts in which they're number 1 in the league, points per possession. Now, maybe that dwindles just a little bit if they take more attempts. However, you still see the numbers. Maybe they need another shooting wing on the perimeter. Maybe they need another shooter, period. Another big body. And I don't know if that's going to be a guard, a big, a wing. I mean, you could look at all 3 and go, you could add anything there.
It's funny that you say that because I was watching the Point Forward podcast, which the episode Tatum was on with Evan Turner and Iguodala, and something Iggy was telling Tatum.
If you go back to like the greats, MJ, Kobe, they get to their spots, right, and they catch it like on the wing. You need a bucket. You don't need a 3. And when you got your live dribble, it's a harder move to make. Now, one-on-one, you got this tween cross, like you and Paul George have like one of the best like tween crosses, or like the cadence of it. It's like, y'all would just leave dudes out the screen. It's pretty incredible. But it's easy to send double teams at you when you so far from the basket with a live dribble. Now, when you catch it and you can triple threat, and you can either get to the elbow or you can get to the baseline, you can get your shot off regardless. Look at KD. When KD got his dribble on the perimeter, what PJ Tucker do to him? Just foul the crap out of him, try to push him out of, but when KD catches it on his spot, everybody knows, damn, I'm dead. Yeah.
I feel like Tatum and Brown were just getting the ball, just booming their spots. And it was just like when Jason Tatum gets the ball in that low post, high wing, free throw line area, it's game over. You've essentially lost. It's either a bucket or a kick out. Like he's not 70% of the time. He's either getting to the rim or he's pulling up for a mid range in which he's shooting probably 55% from. So, and I think that was interesting because, you know, another shooter could complement that and it could make that job easier, because I think with the Celtics right now, I'm looking around the court and I'm like, there's just so many ball handlers and so many, you know, it just feels like when you got, it works, White and Holiday, it's sometimes like, okay, Holiday should be dribbling a little bit more. But he's been doing a phenomenal job. It's just like, I agree. I feel like when Pritchard's out there, I love him. We're not paying him a lot of money, but it's like is Pritchard's best when the ball's in his hands and he can kind of, facilitate a little bit, right? And do that little pick and roll and that step back. And it just feels like, maybe you go different. I personally, the name I'm looking forward to is Alex Caruso. I think, and I don't know if Chicago's going to get rid of him. And financially, I think we'd have to move around some things. The Grant trade exception, I know that's a thing. And then I don't think he fits into that. But I think Caruso would be the perfect fit off the bench alongside Hauser and Horford. I think defensively, he's so talented. I think he can spot up if he needs to. He can drive, he can attack, he can run in transition. Like, that guy is the defensive version of what Sam Hauser is, I think.
Like, I think Caruso, obviously that would be the dream. However, like I think like you'd have to move too many pieces and it'd be a little unrealistic. Like, the way I see the Celtics with the way they're already deep into the tax and stuff. So the way I look at it is they're either going to hit the buyout market or they're going to make small trades, like
That's
guys
what I
on 1-year rentals.
Right.
So some of the things that I've kind of been keeping my eye on, I know Utah might blow it up. I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Talen Horton-Tucker becomes available on the block, though I'm not sure he moves the ball forward more than Peyton Pritchard does. But an underrated thing that I think, could end up helping the Celtics is a guy like Lonnie Walker. I don't know if you've seen, but he's had some moments on the Nets this year where he's looked really good. And he's on a 1-year veteran minimum contract right now, and he's definitely outplaying it. I don't know if the Nets are going to want to pay him next year, but the Celtics could definitely use a 1-year rental out of a guy like that. Like, he's basically a spark off the bench, right?
Right.
So having some more insurance off the bench, he can score, he can shoot. I think he can play off ball, and he's lanky, so he can defend. And I think something like that could definitely add value to this team.
I think,
Yeah, that's exactly the type of player that I was talking about.
I
as
agree.
well.
I like that. I like
just
that.
straight up like somebody who can play both ends of the floor and also offensively shoot the ball on the wing, spot up attempts. Like I'm saying, more spot up attempts for the Celtics.
We're sitting here talking about the Boston Celtics making an adjustment or a move. They're 17-5. They really haven't even started to play their best basketball yet. And I think that's such a really interesting to see with this team is that I've said this in the post-game show. I think there's going to be a time post All-Star break, maybe a week before All-Star break, where this team just starts like there's like, do you remember last year when we started off like 23-4, I want to say, and just everything was falling? Like shot. I think that's going to happen this year, but a little bit like I think we rip off like 19-1, where it's just like the shots are falling. There's like a 7-game homestand in there. And it's just like Drew Holiday gets adjusted, because I do think that's an aspect people don't really talk about. You remember what Derek White was like the first couple months he got to Boston? You give him a full offseason, he became a whole new player. So I do think the Celtics are again, because obviously we're going to keep tabs on them, but if you're not a Celtics fan, keep tabs on the small things with this team. Because as much big headline players they have, and as much as Porzingis and Holiday, there is some small little pieces that and moves I think this team's make that could benefit us. But next team I want to talk about, first time talking about them on the show, and I'm super excited for it. Because I'll tell you what, they kicked our ass. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they're balling. They are hooping. And I was not positive if it was going to hold, but after watching what they did to us defensively, not many teams can do what they did to us. I say that because a lot of the times the Celtics, get outmatched. I feel like it's, they're just shooting themselves in the foot. When Minnesota played us, they were phenomenal. They're right now currently the number 1 defense in the league. They're 17-5, tied for the best record in the league, a net rating of plus 6.8. Guys, are the Timberwolves right now considered to be the team to beat in the Western Conference?
I don't think so. I do love the Timberwolves. I like the pieces that they have. I'm a huge fan of Anthony Edwards. I think he's going to be, he has top 10 player in the league potential, in my opinion. The problem I have with the Timberwolves is I don't know what it's going to look like come playoff time. they just have a lot of guys who, although Anthony Edwards has looked great in the playoffs, Karl Anthony Towns doesn't always look great, especially if they match up with a team like the Nuggets again. I don't know if they're going to be able to beat the Nuggets in a playoff series. And it's kind of just a weird thing with the Timberwolves because I still feel like the Nuggets are the team to beat in the West. And you can argue I might put Phoenix over Minnesota. So I would say Minnesota right now potentially is the third best team in the Western Conference, in my opinion. But I think they're still doing amazing. And even though they're the number one team in the West, I don't really know what it's going to look like. It's going to be interesting.
It's undoubtedly the Denver Nuggets. Ian, I completely agree with you. The Denver Nuggets are the team to beat out West. As long as Nikola Jokic is playing with the Denver Nuggets and healthy, and he's been ejected now twice this season, once last night.
I saw that.
Another time in
That
Detroit.
was so weird.
What's going on?
Detroit
with that?
and Chicago.
Right.
Detroit and Chicago. I feel like these are strategic.
Is that
rest
a trend?
days. It's like, yeah, just play the first half. You know, the fans in Detroit and
pay the
Chicago,
fine. Yeah,
they get to see you and go sit down afterwards, right? And post game, he's putting on his fancy watch. He's got a nice suit on. He's smiling to reporters, and it's all good for Jokic. And I really feel as long as the Nuggets are 100% healthy, they are the team to beat. Now, I will say they haven't exactly been 100% healthy this season yet. We've seen Jamal Murray struggle with a couple of injuries thus far, so we'll see how that develops moving forward. And they do have one of the best home court, if not the best home court advantages in the NBA. And you look at the standings right now, I believe they're third in the Western Conference, if I'm not mistaken. No, fourth right now, actually, behind the Dallas Mavericks as we stand today. So you look at where they are at in the standings. They've been pretty high in the standings the last couple of years, and that home court advantage has certainly done well for them in the playoffs in the past, and that could definitely be a wrinkle for them this season and competing against the Nuggets. However, I still think they're the team to beat at this current moment, and we still need to see the Timberwolves for more than what is just a 22-game sample size. Right. Because I do think there are some flaws within the Timberwolves system on both ends of the floor, mostly offensively, what they're doing. I'm not quite certain if they're the most efficient offensive team in the world, and I wonder if that comes more due later on in the season as the season rolls along. But I still think they're a quality top 4 Western Conference team, if not a top 3 Western Conference team, because of their defensive ability. Rudy Gobert is playing out of his mind. Cat's playing better. And, of course, Anthony Edwards is making a jump as well. And we all talk about Jaden McDaniels being one of the best defenders in the NBA. So they're still going to have a really, really good squad, and they could potentially be the squad who knocks off the Nuggets. But at this point in time, the Denver Nuggets are still the team to beat in the Western Conference.
I'm going to agree with you on that one, and Ian as well. Like, I think when you look at the Timberwolves team, yeah, they're really good right now, but I feel like we've kind of fallen into this trap with Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert, where they have an insane regular season, and they're the 1 seed, but come playoff time, it's just a different animal. Like, I've seen Rudy Gobert just get completely picked apart in the playoffs. There's just so many flaws in his game that you can expose in the playoff, especially in a pick and roll. Especially when you go up against a guy like Jokic. I just think there's so many uncertainties, and they haven't really proved anything. And I also like what Ian said about Cat. Like, what have we seen from Cat in the playoffs?
Right.
Like, we know Anthony Edwards has potential to be that guy. Like, no doubt he can definitely get you 40 points in a playoff game. But what's Cat going to do for you? Is he going to give you 15, or is he going to give you 30? And to me, there's just too many question marks. And especially with how dense and how strong the Western Conference is, I just don't see it happening yet. However, I do think they have the chance to prove people wrong. Like, if they do get a good first round matchup and they take it in 5 or 6 games because they're the 1 seed and you carry on to round 2, I think anything can happen starting there. But I've just seen this trap with Rudy Gobert too many times, so I'm not sold on the Mavericks. And I think as said earlier, as long as Jokic is healthy and he's playing come playoff time, they got to be the favorite in the West.
The West.
Well, see, another thing I want to say about Cat, because you came up with a good point, even if we go back to that Celtics game, Drew Holiday was locking up Karl Anthony Towns. And like it felt like he could not do anything. And we've seen that multiple times in the playoffs, whether it was the first time the Timberwolves made the playoffs against the Rockets. I remember he had a terrible series. Last time against the Nuggets, he did not have a very good series. So, like you said, it's going to be up to Karl Anthony Towns if the Timberwolves do anything, because we know what we're going to get out of Anthony Edwards. But it's going to be up to Cat and Rudy Gobert, like what Finn said.
I mean, the West is just a different beast. And it's going to be really interesting, I think. I like Minnesota a lot. Right now, I think they're the conference's best team. That's right now, that's today, right? In a week, that can change. Once Jamal Murray gets healthy, and once that can change throughout the course of 82 games. I think right now they're the best team in the Western Conference. I don't think they're the team to beat. The Nuggets are the team to beat, not just the West, but in the NBA until someone else proves otherwise. That's the benefit you get of being the defending champ. However, this is something I want to talk about out West. The bracket and how the seeding falls, I think, is going to be really interesting and really important. Because right now, if you're looking at the Western Conference, you have Minnesota at 1 and Phoenix at 8. So it's like, and again, no Beal. So I doubt Phoenix finishes 8, but they're also 13-10, which isn't terrible. That's not an 8th seed record. So, okay, Minnesota versus Devin Booker and Kevin Durant in what is for Minnesota's real first meaningful playoff run. I mean, I get it's a 1 versus 8. And Minnesota's defense is always going to keep on. I mean, defense is something that just doesn't show up, right? Defense always shows up, but I think that's interesting. And or Oklahoma's too, and the Clippers or the Lakers might be 7. And it's like, are the Thunder really ready to take on LeBron James and or Kawhi Leonard in a playoff series? It's like, I don't think so. I don't think they are. I think there's 3 Western Conference teams that I'm like solid sold on right now. The Denver Nuggets, the Dallas Mavericks, and the Sacramento Kings. I think those are the 3 teams who are like proven. There's no weakness in matchup. I think no matter what the matchup is, they'll be in the series and compete. I think a team like Oklahoma, I think they're going to have a great regular season, but I think they're just going to hit a bump in the road when you see a team like, with just a little bit more experience. I just don't think they're there yet. I think the Thunder and the T-Wolves in that category of, up next teams with these young superstars are about a year or 2 away from really being able to like get deep into the playoffs.
I mean, you said the Sacramento Kings. I feel like they're kind of more in the territory of the Thunder and the Timberwolves, because I think there are
they went toe to
weaknesses
toe
in the
with
Sacramento
Steph
Kings
last year, though. They went toe to toe with Steph.
I know
the beam.
I know, and I love the Sacramento Kings.
Right.
Do not get me wrong, but they still had issues guarding Steph Curry, and they still lost that series because their high-powered offense.
That's true. That's true.
They're not the best defensive team in the NBA. Let's just say that.
Not at all.
And that's no disrespect to them, because they're still having a great season. And the Western Conference is kind of going through a changing of the guard type thing, right, where it's like you still have the guys like Kevin Durant in Phoenix, like LeBron and the Lakers, like Steph Curry with the Warriors, even though they're not in the playoffs and they probably won't make it. But you do have these like older veteran guys who are going to match up with these young upstart teams that are technically running the conference in the regular season. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of cool to see the kind of clashing of the young versus the old guys, because like you said, you could see Kawhi Leonard take on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander
right. And that's
in the first round of a playoff series.
That's what's so cool. It's like, where are we at? I think this is such an important year for the NBA. It's like, what point in the NBA timeline are we? Because we could very much be in the Nikola Jokic timeline, right? Where it's like, okay, the certified next best player on the planet is here. However, there's a part of me that's the NBA is trending. They said don't forget, guys, they said the exact same thing about Giannis when the Bucks won the championship in 2021. The exact same thing. They said he was the undisputed best player. He took down Kevin Durant in the Brooklyn Nets, and then he beat a Phoenix Suns team that was a powerhouse that regular season. So I'm not fully convinced that Jokic is the hands down, no question, best player on the planet, because I've seen this story before with Giannis, and now look at where Giannis are and the Bucks are. They're fighting for, this is as important of a season as it could get, I think, for the Bucks. So I do think there's that interesting dynamic. And then there's also the dynamic where it's like, okay, well, LeBron, Kawhi, KD, they've been great for so long. Are those cats done? Are they like, can they still have a playoff run left in the tank? Or is it time for the Luka Doncic's, the Anthony Edwards, the Shai Gilgeous-Alexanders? Is it the new era? So it's like, I think it's so interesting because in the East, you don't see that. In the East, it's okay. It's, we've seen this for the past 4 or 5 years. It's the Celtics, it's the Heat, it's the Bucks, or it's the Sixers, right? It's those that it's been the past 4 or 5 years. It'll be like that for the next 4 or 5 years. And it's like, obviously you got the frisky new teams like Orlando and in Indiana, but they're a couple years shy of really entering the category, I think, of, making a run for the conference.
The West is absolutely insane this year. I mean, you just go down the list, 1 through 10, they're all quality playoff teams. They really are. And that's honestly kudos to Adam Silver and the NBA for implementing the NBA play-in tournament, because you look at 1 through 8, I mean, it would be a bloodbath to get to the 8 seed this season. And now you have the play-in tournament, a little bit more organization there at the end of the season. And even after the 10 teams, you have 2 teams below that 10 mark where you might consider, if suspensions go a little bit differently for 2 different players, maybe these 2 teams are both playoff teams as well. The Warriors and the Grizzlies, they're below the 10 mark. They're below the 10 mark. So that's legitimately 12 teams. And the 3 teams I'm leaving out, let's just lay them out on the table. The Jazz, the Blazers, the Spurs. I mean, they're not really going anywhere.
Where's Houston's at? Where's Houston at for you?
9. Oh,
in terms of, are they, because I like what they're doing. It's Ime. You guys know how I feel about Ime. I love that guy. Are they, is because this sustainable? I mean, 11-9 on a 3-game win streak. They've been a good, a really great home basketball team. 10-1. They're 1-8 on the road. Like, what are we thinking? Can the Rockets, can they make some noise? Or are they just kind of like in the slowly progressing stage right now? You just got to give it more time.
I'm not sold on Houston yet.
You're not. No.
I think, I mean, I know they're well coached and their defense, like, there's a lot of upside there, but I don't think they have a guy yet. And I know Şengün will get there, but I don't think he's good enough to win them a playoff series yet. And Jalen Green, he's not making that leap yet. I'm not sure. Honestly, right now, I'm not even sure if he ever will.
Right. I don't think he will.
Fred VanVleet's a nice piece, but like when you look at the other teams in the West and how compact it really is, I feel like they don't really have that guy that can go out and give them 35 in a playoff game.
Right. I think that I like Şengün. I like Amin Thompson. I like Green. I agree. They're like in a weird stage where it's like you got VanVleet and Dylan Brooks who are contributing to the wins. But you also have this young core. They're playing with house money. I think they're, honestly, I hate to say it, I think they're irrelevant, where it's like you could see them maybe sneak in at like the 8 seed if things go right in their way. But I think there's also a chance where, you're scrolling through the bracket come April or late March, and you're like, they're at 12, 4 games back from 10. They're not really going to do it. You'll see them, maybe next year. So I do think there's that aspect. But guys, if you're an NBA fan, you've seen this.
Green, just such a great passer.
Beal just picked up his 3rd foul. And now Green runs over Nurkic, and he'll be called for the foul. And they're going to take a look at this. See Jason Goebel. Oh, man.
Well, that's going to be a flagrant.
Yep,
and now they're going to just try to decide if they think it was excessive.
What needs to happen with Draymond Green from the NBA in order to make a statement? Because this seems to be happening too much from him.
You know what's crazy is like what he did last night is probably not even in like the top 5 worst things he's ever done. Like that's the craziest thing is like I will say I will give him the benefit of the doubt. It did look a lot more accidental than like the other things that he's done, just like looking at the clip a little more. But at the same time, it's like you didn't have to smack him in the face. Like you didn't have to smack Nurkic in the face. And when it comes to the NBA, I wish I could give you an answer as to how it would make him stop it, but it's like he's been doing it for his entire career. And if the NBA really cared about wanting to making him stop, they probably would have done something by now. Right. But I don't know. I mean, I have a feeling they'll probably end up suspending him for like 5 to 10 games again, like the Rudy Gobert situation. And in a couple months from now, we're going to see something else happen. I don't know who you put your money on next. I guess I'd have to put my money on something that happened to Jonas Valanciunas. Just going on with
going
the whole
off trends, the European
just going
trend.
off with the trends. But yeah, so Jonas Valanciunas better watch out soon. But
can we just evaluate the past 30 games the Warriors have played in? In those 30 games, he has stomped on Domantas Sabonis's face. He has choked out Rudy Gobert, and now he has full-on swung and punched Yusuf Nurkic. Like, all jokes aside, there truly, I think, has to come a point where it's like, this is getting just blatantly like abusive, where it's like, you don't know how Draymond Green is going to act out in a basketball game. You know, when is there a point where you have Draymond Green swinging on someone and someone actually comes back? And then you're like, you saw what happened in the Malice in the Palace and how bad that was for the league. It's like, I feel like you have to make a statement, especially with the NBA's track record. I think the NBA has been doing a terrible job at punishing their players. And I think the league has protected Draymond Green for so long. And Seamus, I know you've been talking about this on your Instagram, is that like, you know, you look at the Ja Morant situation and you know, where do you think the league needs to go with Draymond because of the Ja situation?
Well, this Draymond situation is absolutely ridiculous at this point because we talked about it on the post game last night. There's a level of acceptance for star players and players who win championships and players who become the face of the league, right? There's just more of an acceptance and a tolerance for those type of players to act out and do certain things, especially on court, that may not be all that bad at the end of the day, but for other players, they can't exactly get away with the same thing. Well, right. Draymond Green at this point, I mean, he's just absolutely abusing his power within the NBA. And I really don't think that anyone at this point in time is supporting Draymond Green. And even you hear Steph Curry last night, it feels like Steph Curry is just tiptoeing around a bush, and he can't exactly stand in front of a train for Draymond anymore because these type of antics, they're getting out of hand. This is legitimate violence at this point. I mean, I don't think that was accidental at all. If you really, to me, looking at the tape, really, he winds up. He literally winds up, takes his fist and goes across. And it's like, is that really? And it's like, and he goes, you can see him to the ref afterwards. You can see him go, he grabbed my hip. Like, do you really think Yusuf Nurkic grabbed Draymond that hard for him to go all the way around and hit him?
I mean, he got
exactly
his body
in the
into
face.
that too. There was some like
maybe it's not as accidental as I thought.
It's really, just think about it. When you're like it's just physically, it's not accidental. I don't think, looking at the tape. And I think the league is going to look at the tape. I think they're also going to sip the internet too, as well, because they look at fan opinions on the internet for sure in regards to these type of things. I think a lot of people are outraged, and a lot of people are probably saying the same type of stuff we are, where it's like, okay, maybe 5 to 10 games. And if the league really wants to hand down a punishment, go and hand him 25 games. You handed DeAndre Ayton 25 games for accidentally taking a substance the year after his rookie year. So why Draymond Green hitting players, stomping on players, choking out players, why can't he receive 25 games? I just don't understand at this point in time why the NBA can't hand down that severe of a suspension to him. I think personally, if they want to do something, they're going to do something like that.
Right.
And I think there's going to be a significant fine coming as well, too, because these type of situations, you mentioned it, Rob, perfectly. You don't want another Malice at the Palace situation. And these type of things are bad for the branding of the league.
100%.
Okay, they're bad for the branding of the league when you have a 4-time champion outright committing violence on court every 15 games.
Oh, well, I mean, at what point?
Every 15 games.
What point is it when you see someone act? No one stands back up. I mean, I think it's if you let this keep slipping, there's going to be a moment where someone says, "Screw this, I'm going back at him." And then they go back at him, and then Draymond goes back at them, and then it just escalates. And I think the NBA is such a great product. I think they're doing a phenomenal job. Adam Silver's with a play-in tournament and the in-season tournament. There's just the All-Star game, bringing back East-West. I mean, he's making a conscious effort to really make the NBA, the face of sports on the globe. But I mean, you see this lingering issue that is Draymond Green, and it's like people don't want to see this guy just getting away with literally like abusing other players. I think it's gotten way too far.
Yeah, I don't know. I think as far as Adam Silver is concerned, it's all in his hands. And unless he gets 20 plus games, I don't really think it's a huge punishment. Like, we know Draymond's track record. We know what he's notorious for. So unless Adam Silver's out here giving him 20, 25, why won't this happen again? You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think the idea that, something way worse like a Malice at the Palace could happen, I don't think it's completely out of the picture, considering, like, I think people are almost out to get Draymond Green at this point. Like, they're aware of his antics, and a lot of people don't like him. And, you poke the bear with the wrong guy, there's going to be a big fight. And in the game against Minnesota, well, I mean, the refs did a pretty nice job separating that, but that itself was wild, right? So
that could have been bad.
Exactly. That could have been a lot worse. So what's preventing that from not happening again?
No, for sure. But this raises a question. Is this the end of the Warriors dynasty, of the Steph, Draymond, and Clay era? Are we seeing the end of what was a phenomenal run for the Golden State Warriors, guys?
Steph Curry is still Steph Curry to me, and I think that's where you got to start. When it comes to Draymond Green and Klay Thompson, yeah, they're not the same players they were, and I think everybody has accepted that fact. However, I still think they can be effective. Like, if Klay Thompson understands what a good shot is, and he actually has a role, I think the Warriors can still technically compete. Maybe this year is officially not is out of the picture just because all the mess that's happened. But if Klay Thompson takes a little bit of a pay cut and accepts a role, Steph Curry is still going to be Steph Curry next year. I guarantee it. Draymond Green, when he plays into his role, yeah, he's Draymond Green, right? You get some more pieces around him, and I don't know if they'll be able to compete at the championship level, but the Warriors will still be around as long as Steph Curry's Steph Curry.
I think that
the
Warriors have. I think it's done. Again, you got Steph Curry. I agree with you there, Finn. The dude is still, arguably the greatest point guard of all time. However, if you look at what's transpired since their championship win in 2022, you have the Draymond Green. So first of all, the Warriors, they win the finals 2022. You got, Curry's playing some arguably the best basketball of his career, at least for the past 5 years. You got Klay Thompson, who looks good. Andrew Wiggins, who found a new home. You got Kuminga. You got Poole. You got Moses Moody. You got Looney, who are kind of like your young up next core. You figure they're going to compete with the young guys, or with the older guys, the young guys supporting. And then the Jordan Poole, Draymond Green incident happens. And you're like, okay, well, there goes that season. That blew up that locker room fast. And then they're like, okay, well, we got to decide between Draymond Green and Jordan Poole. And Draymond, being who Draymond is and doing what Draymond has done, they trade Jordan Poole for who? Chris Paul, who is another 37-year-old. So it's like, I look at the Golden State Warriors, and outside of Steph Curry, if you remove Steph from the picture, what can you do? I mean, Clay's got no value. Draymond's got no value. I mean, Kuminga and Moody have essentially, the value could be there. The potential could be there, but are you really going to give up anything more than maybe a first round pick for Kuminga at this stage? So it's like, I mean, if you really look, I think they sold Jordan Poole, who I thought fit well with Golden State and next to Steph Curry. And I just don't see a direction that this team can head with this constructed roster. I think I think the Golden State Warriors I think they're fizzled out.
Well, what about this? So say it's a trade deadline and the Warriors flip Kuminga or Moody and Andrew Wiggins and maybe a first round pick to the Raptors and they get Siakam back.
Right.
Let's say Draymond Green comes back and they slip into the play-in spot. They win the play-in. Now they're 7th seed, which to be honest is not completely out of the picture in my opinion. Then you're facing a team like OKC in the first round.
Right.
Do you think the Warriors can compete with the Thunder or the Mavericks, depending on who the second seed is? Because me personally, I think the Warriors could win that series, and then anything happens in the second round.
Right. I think it's one of those things where it's like if Steph Curry's on the court, you can't doubt him. So again, any playoff series Curry's in, I like their chances. But I mean, so say if they move Moody, Wiggins, and Kuminga with the first for Siakam, you're looking at Chris Paul, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Siakam, Draymond, and Looney. I mean, it's not a terrible 5 or a terrible 6. I mean, yeah, I mean, if that happens, then I think my only concern and doubt would be, can they make a mid-season trade work? We've never really seen it, but I mean, yeah. So, maybe there is a route for the Warriors to compete for another year or two, but I guess in the essence in which the Warriors dynasty, winning rings and making NBA finals, I think that is up. I think that's where I'm at.
I personally believe the Warriors. I don't know. You can. Yeah, I don't know. You can take this one, Ian, right now.
No, you got it. You got it.
I think we both want to say our dues on the Warriors because we were starting to talk about it last night, but I don't think we fully got into it like we're about to get into it right now. The Warriors are not in a position, in my opinion, to compete this year. They really aren't. They aren't. They have Steph Curry, and that is a fact. But we've seen it so many times. If you don't have the other intangibles to your team amidst a growing competitive field, I just don't think they can do it. Now, could their pieces turn it around and their team perform better throughout the season? Yes, theoretically. But I think, what we just talked about, Draymond Green, his suspension looming, that's going to really derail their season, especially in the standings where they're at. And I think they're going to be looking at an uphill climb the second half of the season, particularly after Christmas, to the point where they might not be able to grab a seed in which they can actually compete with. They might be competing in the play-in tournament, or even to a point where they might pack it in again and another top draft pick. Maybe you send something away in the offseason and rebuild around Steph Curry, who's still at the end of his prime, I will say. But you just look up and down this team. Klay Thompson, this is almost 2013 Lakers territory where a couple of these bodies are just getting too old to the point where I don't see the competitive edge anymore. Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, he's about to be suspended. Chris Paul, they traded 24-year-old Jordan Poole for 37-year-old Chris Paul. Whatever problems they own with Jordan Poole, I personally believe they could have been resolved rather than going out and resorting to trying to win now with this roster with a 37-year-old Chris Paul. And I want to mention this too with this team because, well, first, Andrew Wiggins. If he was better this season, you have to think they have a couple more wins as well. But this team is not led by who they were led by the past couple of years. And those years include their entire dynasty run. And that is Bob Myers, the GM. He stepped away in May.
ESPN.
I think he knew what was happening.
Mike Dunleavy, who we all know played for the Bulls back in the day, early 2010s, 2000s, right? Mike Dunleavy comes in. He trades Jordan Poole away for Chris Paul. That's not a Bob Myers move. That's not
Bob Myers
a
would not
move
have done that.
coming from their GM who built all of their championship rosters. All of them. Every single one. All 4 championship rosters, including a couple in which you can say they probably should have won, 2019 and 2016. That could have been 6 championships right there. Bob Myers did not make that move. It was Mike Dunleavy. And I really do believe that those type of decisions in the front office, when you have different heads, those matter. You look at Danny Ainge, you look at Brad Stevens, although they were in the same building for the same amount of time, or I shouldn't say the same amount of time, good amount of time together, right? Brad Stevens is a completely different GM than Danny Ainge was. So even if Mike Dunleavy was under Bob Myers, right, I still believe that change at the GM position, that's going to be huge for the Warriors going into the future. And I have a lot of questions surrounding this roster and what moves are going to be made, because when Brad Stevens came into the GM spot, we all said he's going to have to make tough decisions. Is Mike Dunleavy going to have to make is he going to make the tough decisions rather? Because I think he's going to have to. I really think he's going to have to at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say the effery is over. Obviously I can't say the word, but I think you get what I mean. I think the biggest problem with the Warriors right now, they are kind of in a situation, I hate to bring this to football, but they're kind of in a situation where the Patriots are.
I was going to say that.
Their dynasty is not, they did not do enough to plan for the future after Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. I think they were banking on Klay Thompson and Draymond Green to age as well as Steph Curry has been able to age. And if we're being honest, Klay Thompson, he's been a negative to this Warriors team. And I mean, I'm not going to say he wasn't great during the 2022 run, but he was coming off the injury and he was still, you could tell he was still getting his feet under him. And he didn't look amazing in that playoff run. Last season, he was okay. He wasn't terrible. He played pretty solidly. And then coming into this season now, he's playing for a contract and he's having arguably the worst year of his career. He wants a max contract from the Warriors. Are the Warriors going to give him that money?
Right.
No chance in hell are they going to give him that money. And that's their other problem is not only is their core not playing well, Draymond doing Draymond things, Klay Thompson underperforming, they have not been able to develop anybody. You drafted James Wiseman 2nd overall in the 2020 draft. You gave up on him, I think maybe a little too soon, but I think they had to trade him because they weren't going to develop him into anything. You gave up on Jordan Poole to trade for Chris Paul. And what else do you have? You don't let Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody play. And that can bring back to the third problem, which is Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr does not let any of their young guys play at all. And the biggest thing that we saw and people talked about was the Sacramento Kings game, the final game of their in-season tournament run. Moses Moody hit back-to-back threes in the fourth quarter. He was cooking the Sacramento Kings. He was looking amazing. And then with like 7 minutes left in the game, they're like, hey, Moses, thanks for doing all that. Klay Thompson's going to come back in now and shoot 1 for 15 in the game and just be terrible.
Well, he did that last night for the first time in the media.
He did that last night, and I was just going to say that. Finally, they let the young guys who were playing insanely well at the end of that game, and they made that a 3-point deficit. And they call a timeout, they drop a play, and guess who's not on the court? Andrew Wiggins and Klay Thompson.
Yeah, Wiggs and Klay, yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. I feel like they need to rely more on their young guys and try to develop somebody. And I mean, I don't know, what was the last player they developed outside of that big three? Like actually drafted, developed, turned into a serviceable player. Kevon Looney?
Yeah, Looney,
perhaps.
Looney, yeah. I mean,
and Looney doesn't even get that much playing time anymore. Dario Saric has looked like a better center than Kevon Looney at times.
I think that, I mean, as much as I want to agree with you there, I mean, they've been picking from like 30 for a while.
No, I get that.
They hit on Poole, and I think they hit on Looney, but I mean, it's just like, I love your Pats analogy, because I think teams need to know and organizations need to know when to let go and when to let go too early rather than too late. I don't know if because quite frankly, you still have a really talented Steph Curry. And when you have a really talented Steph Curry, you still have a shot at it. But it's just like, where do you go? And I almost want to be like, listen, you did it 10 years straight. You were dominant. It's time for a new era in Golden State. And I think listen, like, Draymond's losing his mind, it feels like. Klay Thompson is just an absolute shell of his former self. Steph Curry is still Steph Curry. Andrew Wiggins doesn't look like he wants to play basketball. And Chris Paul is 38 years old. It's like, what do you like? Are you like, so what? Do you sacrifice your future to maybe squeeze out a Western Conference Finals appearance? Maybe that's saying if you can even get past a team like Minnesota or Oklahoma or out the late. I don't think they even if they see the Lakers, I don't think they can beat the Lakers in their current state. I don't even think they can get into the playoffs at their current state. So it's like, I feel like if I'm Golden State and I'm Mike Dunleavy and I'm Steve Kerr and I'm Steph Curry, you got to sit down and have a real conversation and be super realistic with yourself and ask the question, is this realistic to get this done? Or are we better off just saying, new chapter? That's not me saying Steph Curry leaves Golden State, because I don't think that happens. But I mean, it might, if Curry feels like he's got more in the tank and just stuff like questions like that, because I don't think they do it with their constructed roster. And I don't think Curry really wants to, waste his. I think he's got 3 good years left. I don't think he wants to waste it. So I think they got a lot of choices to be made. A lot of scenarios you could play out. However, if you got Steph Curry on your basketball team, yeah, there's always a chance, right? There's always a chance with Steph Curry. However, guys, I would just want to say thank you so much for joining us in on the second episode of Around the Hardwood, the NBA show. You honestly killed it on the first episode. You loved it. So until next week, guys, I'm Rob. Finn, thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna put his stuff in the description, but odds are there's not anyone here that's not following him already. So from Rob, from Ian, from Seamus, and from Finn, guys, happy holidays, Christmas time and the holidays, New Year's and Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. Happy holidays, guys, from us here at Celtics Talk Weekly. And until next time, guys, make sure to like, follow, comment, subscribe, all of it. Peace.